So we've done 75% of the course of the revolution. I think you are also noticing the progress that we have and the developments that are happening in the revolution. We started with the National Assembly and moved to the Legislative Assembly and went on to the convention. We finished the convention yesterday and we talked about the convention coming up with the new constitution. So I always say whenever we see a new constitution coming through, this simply means that a new government is also being ushered in. So the new government that we are going to look into is called the what? It's called the what? I need 2 lessons here, then I'm done. So the establishment of the directory government was a response to some of the problems that the revolution had experienced before. Of course, the Jacobins, we can't deny the fact that they defended the revolution. Yes, that's fine. But the way they were defending it was now too brutal to an extent that people had to say enough is enough. So let us look at the directorate under the directory. So the convention responded to the above lessons by establishing a directorate to rule France. Right. It was a government headed by how many people? 5. It was headed by 5 people called directors. This meant that the days of the control of the affairs of the state by one person were over, because we had the control of the state by one person under the convention. You heard about Robespierre controlling everything at one. So no. We have to run 35. So one director was expected to retire each year. Continuity in national policy was achieved through the remaining 4 directors, and at the same time avoiding a continuous reign of an individual. Yes, there wasn't someone. One leader was not supposed to rule, let's say, for 5 consecutive years or what. If your year is done, you have to give others an opportunity. So to avoid individuals dominating a new constitution was established that created an assembly with the 2 chambers. That's democracy for you. So the assembly had 2 chambers. The first chamber was called the what? The Council of the 500. Its duty was to propose the law, and its members had an age limit of 30 years and above. Then the second chamber was called the Council of Elders. It debated the laws. I want you to understand this. The Council of 500 proposed the laws. Then the Council of Elders debated the laws, which were made by the Council of 500, and its age limit was 45 years and above. Why do you think so? That in the Council of Elders, they needed leaders who were 45 years and above. Why do you think so? Angel, why do you think so? Exactly. Akamwana zvikoro zvitsvaka maticha zvinoti tikuda teacher akalise ane 30 years and above vanenge vachiitira nyaya number 1 maturity, number 1 nyaya age. But it's not wholly true that people who are older are wise and stuff. You can be a 70-year-old fool, and you know that zvinogonoitika. Kuno vanhu vanonetsa aine 65 years. Because pane a general myth ari mumusociety wekuti munhu kana akura akungofanira kurespect akudini. Kuno vamwe nekuti anenge aine 45 years but anenge achiacta kunga munhu ane 9 years. So the age limits were meant to confine governance to mature individuals, and by having a 2-chamber assembly, the new constitution introduced a system of checks and balances in the politics of France. Because there are people who are proposing laws, then there are people who are debating it. So it creates a scenario, an aura of checks and balances. Hapana, like we call it a decentralization of duties or of powers. Zvangofani kuti ukapinda musupermarket pane vanenge vachiti vari kuitawo zve operating, pane vari kuitawo zve merchandising, pane vanenge vachidasta nekafeather dust, so pane vanenge vachikorobha mumafloor, pane vemanagement, pane vanenge vachiita zveaccounting dzepa-supermarket. That's what we call division of labor. It helps in the smooth flow of operations. So munhu wana akati ndini ndiri kugadzirisa mavoid ese, ndini ndiri kupa vanhu mari yemukuru, ndini tiri operator, ndini ndiri kukorobha pasi, panoitisa incompetence. And zvakakosha kuti sometimes muchitombochinjana maroles inoita kuti uzive kuti mninga anodai ndosaka chinoti pamwe pacho tii operator anogona kunga akuoparita kana kuti achipa vanhu chikafu kunosevhwa vanhu food kunenge kuchibikwa like zvinobatsiridza kuti iyewo futi panofanira kunga paine machecks and balance ekuti ukaita mamistakes uyo anokuudzawo because agara anoziva basa iroro something like that which is very good because the mob influence was reduced by limiting voters to the taxpayers, thereby removing elective powers from the mob. Because we've seen that the mob has caused a lot of problem under the convention. So they say the mob must not be given power. And that's true. Sometimes when people are given power, they abuse it. And that's what most of the Jacobins were now doing during the convention. So they were now saying, no, those people must not be near power at all. Vanhu vanofana kuvota. Vanofana kunga vari machi a certain level of taxpayers. So to prevent the resurgence of the royalists because of the new elective laws based on the franchise, 2/3 of the deputies in the chambers were elected by the convention itself. So the convention voted to maintain a republican form of government, thereby removing any hopes of the royalist resurgence. And again, we learned that the Jacobin club was closed down, thereby marking the end of the Jacobin era. This included all other clubs that existed in France. So what were the problems which bedeviled the directory? What were the problems which the directory faced? Number one, the political problems. The composition itself was a disaster because the people in the directory were divided. Yes, the government itself, the composition of that parliament, of those chambers, because they were revolutionaries, they were Republicans, they were constitutional monarchists and moderates. In other words, the French nation at that time was highly polarized. So pakadaro my ideas sometimes anonetsa kucombine because so these divisions affected the development of the country. This angered the people and they began to lose confidence in the directory. So according to Thompson, the men who successfully became directors were, except for the patriotic genius of Carnot, disreputable and self-seeking politicians of little ability. According to Thompson, most of the people who became the directors were only looking for personal glory or personal gain, right? So, these men wanted to consolidate and increase their gains. So they succeeded in preventing the repetition of Robespierre's revolutionary dictatorship, but they later on produced Napoleon again. So the director lost his support when it declared that the legislators were supposed to come from the convention. So you can talk of the rising of Prairial, the rising of Geminal. Those were risings or potential coups of people trying to topple the director, even the Verona Declaration too. And another political problem first was the Babouf plot, right? There was this man called Gracias Babouf. He did not like that constitution, which he said it gave power to the rich, right? He proposed to abolish private ownership of property. So from March 1796, Babouf plotted a coup to overthrow the directory. But Babouf received no support from the Sans-Culottes and little from the former Jacobins. So at the end of the day, he was assassinated. That's what they said, right? There were so much. There were many movements. There were many movements, which proves that the people were not happy with the government. That's why there was the coup d'etat, frac d'etat of 1797, and you find out that the elections of 1797 showed that the monarchist people were tired of war and abroad and religious conflict at home, and believed that a constitutional monarchy could bring peace and stability. Of the 216 members of the convention who sought re-election, only 11 were returned. So monarchists won 180 of the 260 seats being contested for. So the number of monarchists in both councils was now 330. And the directory had also lost the support of the richer bourgeoisie, as suggested by the results of the northern departments. So the monarchists therefore expected that if the trend continued, they would eliminate the conventional on the future elections. So there was also the coup of 3 to 4 September 1797. That is important for us to know. Like one royalist was appointed as the president of the 500. Remember, the revolution is still ongoing, and the people do not want any royalist to run the country because it simply means kutapana zvateta extra revolution. kana isusu takarwisa kuti tichinje nyika tibvise maroyalist, then odzoka futi achirana nyika, then we have wasted our effort. So another royalist was appointed as the president of the ancients. Bartholomew, a new director, was regarded as sympathetic to the monarchist. Bartholomew, one of the directors, angari sympathetic, aifarira machi royalist district. So kutoti vakatosvika pakutozara in that parliament. So Canute again was also becoming more conservative. He was prepared to give up conquered territory to make a lasting peace. Therefore, he was disliked by the what? By the army generals. So of the remaining directors, 2 were committed Republicans who were determined to prevent the restoration of the monarchy. So they sought the help of the what? Of the army. And again, Bonaparte, because the director is directly linked with the rise of what? Of Napoleon. The director is the one which gave Napoleon the platform to showcase his abilities. So Bonaparte had already sent General Auguerre to Paris with some troops to support the Republican troops. So on the night of 3 to 4 September 1797, troops were ordered to seize all the strong points in Paris and surround the council chambers. They then arrested Canute and Bartholomew and 53 deputies. Some of the remaining deputies who attended the councils felt intimidated, and they approved 2 decrees demanded by the remaining directors. Right. Number 1, the first decree was cancelling elections in 49 departments and also removing 177 deputies without providing for their replacement. Why are they cancelling elections? Because the elections were giving the royalists a leeway. The elections were giving the royalists sort of a chance. Yes. Royalists are. So number 2, the deportation to Guyana of Canute, Bartholomew, the 53 deputies arrested, and some leading royalists. That's what they wanted. They wanted them to be deported. Right? To be deported is to be chased away from the country. Yes. So the directors also cancelled the local government elections and made appointed themselves. So what were the results? Number 1, the executive had won an important victory over the legislature, right? Because those were the directors. So in political science, we usually say we have the judiciary, then we have the legislature, then we have the executive. So the judiciary ndo panenge paine vanhu futi vanoenforce law nevanhu vanoti mutemo wanyatsa kuitwa carried out zvakanaka. The legislatures ndo vatinoti malawmakers ndo mune parliament. Then the executive ndo group ringana president tinoiti presidium ndo inonzi executive. So apa pane clash yanga iripo between the executive and the parliament. So executive ndo yakabva yaita chigiant vayatanga kumeka ma-decisions yese. Ndo pazobudiswa point kuti the executive had won an important victory over the legislature and monarchists were silenced. The directorate could now govern without facing hostile councils. So after the fractita, the new directorate took action against emigres and refractory priests. Number 1, emigres who had returned to France were given 2 weeks to leave France or they would be executed. During the next few months, many were hunted down and sentenced to death. And the clergy were now to take an oath rejecting any support for royalty. Those who refused would be deported. 1,400 non-juring priests were deported. To be deported is to be sent out of the country. So the directorate also faced some economic problems. France had many financial problems due to bankruptcy because France was now constantly in war. Like from the point they had that 1792 Revolutionary War, because in history a war begets another war. Mukangotanga skill rekungorowana chete, muchangoramba muchingorowana because at the end of the day munhu anosara aine bundura aina ruda kutokurwisa chedau todai. So France was constantly in war. So the army needed food, the army needed clothing. So at the end of the day, the assignats that were introduced during the National Assembly time, they lost their values. So they replaced those with the paper money called the mandates. That was introduced in March 1796, but it soon lost its value. So government officials and workers, rentiers and workers saw the decline in their purchasing power. So metal coins now became the only legal currency and they were in short supply. So this resulted in deflation as the suppliers lowered prices to attract customers. There is inflation. Inflation is the rise of prices. Then deflation is to what? To lower prices. Let's say utengesa bhutsu dzako $100. Vanhu havasi kutenga unodziita pondo because unozopedzisira kuti regai ndiwane mari. So that process yekudzikisa kana tiri kueconomics we call it what? Deflation. Rise price is called what? Inflation. So serious food shortages began to be encountered, and the government could not do anything to overcome the problem being faced by the people. So there were some financial reforms. Because at that time there was a finance minister called Dominic Ramel. He introduced some reforms. First, with such a tight economic situation, he sought to find ways to resuscitate, to resurrect the economy. So in September 1797, 2/3 of the national debt was renounced by one-off payment to creditors. Their loans to government were converted into non-interest-bearing bonds. The bonds could be used to buy national property, and this reduced the national debt from 240 million francs to 80 million francs. So what did Ramel do? He increased the revenue. Akatsvaga nzira dzaangaita kuti hurumende iwane mari, because tataura kuti hurumende yakabroka. Number one, in 1798 4 basic forms of indirect taxation were established. He taxed the trading licenses. Whenever you are doing any trade, you are selling something, you're supposed to be taxed. There was a land tax, there was a tax on movable property, there was a tax on doors and windows, So these measures were among the most lasting achievements of the Directory and survived up until 1914, even up to 1914. So I don't think the collection of taxes is a problem at all. The problem is vanocollecta vacho vakatanga kujilambasta mari yacho yematext ndo pane nyaya. Matex kana achingocontrolwa vanhu vachigadzira marodhi nekudini zvese, there is no problem. So the collection of direct taxes was centralized. Commissioners appointed by the directors were to assess and levy taxes, and due to continual deficit during the wartime, the unpopular system of the ancient regime of indirect taxes was revived. The octroys were reintroduced and was unpopular since it raised the prices of goods in the towns. So another source of income was the plunder from the defeated states, especially Italy and Germany, because the country was now involving itself into some foreign wars. So vaiti vakanodya nyika idzodzo vanenge vadya, they could take wealth from those countries. So the impact of these policies were positive. Yes, they were positive. Why? The bankruptcy of the 2/3 helped to stabilize French finances for a time. Ramel was able to balance the budget for the first time since the revolution began. To balance the budget, so the director was also faced by a litany of social problems. Like number one, there was corruption. It was a problem. Why are we doing that? Because we also want to look at this. The achievements of the director later on, being faced by the problems. There is the background of these problems. So what did the directory do later on? So the directory was littered with the corruption. It was a problem, especially among the directors. One of the directors, Heinz Barras retained his position in the directory through bribes. The directors were to resign at the end of each year, but Barras bribed the people to support him. Then he was always there for the longer time. So there was also poverty, especially in rural areas. A number of people died as a result of starvation, and the government did not do anything to assist the people. Inflation was persistent. The mandates that replaced the assignats lost value as soon as they were introduced. Prices of goods continued to rise, and this led to a number of people to be unable to purchase basic commodities. And many people were unemployed, and this brought anger and frustration among the people. This explains why there were revolts, and a number of youths had nothing to do. Yes, due to that unemployment. And an idle mind is also the devil's workshop. So there was also poor harvest of 1795. It led to deaths, and close to 1,000 people died due to starvation. And this led most people to lose trust in the directory. And as a result, the directory lost the support of the people. And again, there was the issue of the religion. Remember, the Hebetists had disturbed the religious fabric of France. So it was now the duty of the government to try and mend that. But the directory failed. It was Napoleon who later on came up with the Concordat with the Pope in 1801 in order to mend the relationship between the populace and the church. So the government did not do anything to normalize the relations with the Roman Catholic Church. The relations between the state and the church had been antagonized by the influence of the Hebetists. So this led the directory to be unpopular. So That's it for today. I think we'll be continuing on Monday. Right.